Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Filter. On this show, we recognize the world can be a confusing place to live in. And so what I seek to do on this show is to equip you to live with biblical clarity in our confusing world so that you can face the chaos of life with wisdom, integrity, and courage. On this episode of Filter, we have the pleasure of speaking with acclaimed children's author Bill Myers. For those who may not be familiar with his work, Bill Myers is a prolific writer and director, including popular adult and children's series and the popular TV series McGee Me. His books have sold millions of copies worldwide and have been translated into many languages. In this episode, we'll dive into Bill Myers' creative process, hear about his journey to becoming a film, book, and TV writer, and explore the impact of media in our world today. As author and producer, Myers' work has sold over 8 million books and videos and has won 80 national and international awards, including the C.S. Lewis Honor Award. His latest adult novels include Eli and the Rendezvous with God series. His children projects include McGee Me book and video series, The Incredible Worlds of Wally McDougal, as well as being a writer and director for episodes of Adventure in Odyssey. He also has his current book series that we discussed on this episode called The Magnificent Mulligans. When he is not writing and running his film production company, he teaches a class on discipleship at a local high school. Before we get into this episode, let me encourage you to subscribe to Filter wherever you get your podcasts so that you don't miss out on any future episodes. You can get them right on your homepage whenever they release. Also, subscribe to our email list so that you don't miss out on any future content or bonuses that we release along with episodes. Just click on the link to the show notes below, and you can sign up on my website. Lastly, if you've been helped by this episode or any of our other episodes here on Filter, let me encourage you to leave Filter a rating and review on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, and also share the show with your friends. It only takes a minute of your time, but it greatly helps us out to get the message of biblical clarity out to more people. Without any further delay, let's jump into this great conversation that I got to have with Bill Myers. Bill, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks. It's good to be here, Aaron.
Yeah, well, I'm glad to have you on. I've been looking forward to getting to meet you and talk. Whenever I was looking at your bio before, you've worked on a lot of things that I've enjoyed over the years, and so I thought this would be fun. Why don't you just start by telling us about how you got into media and writing and all things you've done over the years? How did you get started in this?
Wow, as a child, my ambition was I wanted to be a dentist. I wanted to get into the medical field, and then I was 18 when I made this crazy promise always to say yes to God. As uninformed as he may be of the situation, I would make this commitment as best as I could. About 6 weeks after that, I'm sitting in a movie theater watching the third movie of my life, fourth movie. I grew up in the mountains of Washington State. We didn't get out much. I had seen The Parent Trap. I'd seen Pinocchio. I'd seen Pollyanna, all very light, fluffy films as a child. And now, as a freshman at the University of Washington, I'm sitting watching The Godfather. And, at the end, blood is spurting and people are getting massacred. And I'm numb looking at this, at the power of film. And what really sealed the deal for me was my new friends were standing up and cheering when people were getting massacred. And I just walked out of that theater giving God a good piece of my mind. I was saying, listen, you need to, it's only an 18-year-old can do. You need to pay attention here. There's power in this stuff. And you know what you need to do. And thanks for asking, Lord, you need to raise up people to get involved in this movie stuff. And every time I told him what he had to do, it sort of bounced back at me. And we had quite a few arguments about that. But about 6-10 weeks later, I said, okay, fine, I'll be a movie, whatever they're called. And I changed my major to filmmaking, discovered there wasn't a film department at the University of Washington at that time. No film school would take me, so I wound up in Rome, Italy, studying a subject I knew nothing about in a language I couldn't speak.
Wow.
To further increase God's joke on me and the rest of humanity, I've got a language impairment. I was pretty old as a kid before I ever began to speak. And, of course, this isn't role model behavior, but I had to cheat my way through high school to take French to get into the University of Washington. So now I'm in Rome, Italy, having no idea what they're talking about or the subject. And I was there for a year. But you know something? I wasn't bored. I began to realize that maybe this serious, hardcore Christian stuff was anything but boring. Moved back to the States, got married, moved down here to Southern California to become a rich and famous film director. Discovered they already had plenty of those. They didn't need any more, but thanks for playing. And proceeded to starve. We didn't starve. We just became experts at eating macaroni and cheese and top ramen and all of those. And I'm telling God, look, I made this promise, and it's been pretty exciting so far, and then the phone rings, and a guy calls up who I was directing a play in Hollywood for free because nobody would hire me, and he had seen the play, and he asked me if I'd write for his TV series. And I asked him if he paid. He said yes. I said sure. I hung up and broke into tears going, Lord, what have I done? I got C's and D's in my one writing class. You know how I am with language. Anyway, I wrote the world's worst TV show. It was so bad that I threw a tennis shoe at the TV set. It was my own show as I'm watching it. And by the grace of God, it's out of syndication, so nobody will ever find it. And that's fine with me. I wrote another one, and this time they were smart enough not to buy it. A third one, they didn't buy that script. And then I get another call from a publisher, an uninformed publisher that back east, that said, Mr. Myers, we understand that you're a famous Christian TV writer. And I say, go on. And if I could just take time from my busy schedule of starving, could I write a book for them? And I asked them if they paid. They said yes. I said sure. I hung up and once again just broke into tears. So my whole life, the key to my success is I'm a crybaby, I'm a coward, but I just keep saying yes, and he just keeps surprising me. I think it's like so many Christians get a ticket and they get into the stadium and they sit in the stands and they think that's it, and Jesus is down on the field saying, okay, come on down and play. And all my friends are going, oh, no, I got the mortgage and the car payments. And I'm just silly enough in the back going, ooh, pick me. Come on. Mm-hmm. And I go down there, and it's scary being on the field. But, it's like, Jesus. And he, okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And it's just been one remarkable event after another. Same thing with McGee Me, this kids video series that a lot of people have seen. Anyway, I could go on and on and on, but the point is, this isn't false humility, it's just the truth. The point is, God keeps, I think there's so few people willing to jump off the cliff for God that he'll take whoever he can get, and I'm one of those folks.
Yeah, that's good. It reminds me of some advice that I had gotten whenever I was in college. And I was talking with a guy at my school, and he was asking me about my future plans in ministry and where I saw myself in the future. And, no 21-year-old or so really knows that very well. And I told him, I'm really just open to whatever God wants. Whatever God wants me to do is what I want to do. And he said, that's a good outlook. And he said, I think that the best thing you can do is just to always have an attitude of yes towards God. Just before he even shows you what is the way, what door he's going to open, your attitude is just, yes. Whatever the way, whatever your plan is, yes, I'm in. And that's what I hear in your story.
Lord, all I've got are these 5 loaves of bad bread and these 2 fish. I can't do that. Just give me what you got. But just give me what you got. I'll take care of the rest.
Yeah. Yeah, whenever I was reading your bio and all, one of the first things that caught my eye was that you worked on McGee Me. And, so I was a kid in the 90s and Christian kid in the 90s, and McGee Me was, I loved it. It was one of my favorite series, one of my favorite Christian series. Adventures in Odyssey as well was just a fabulous Christian cartoon. And
Aaron, I have to tell you how I wound up being the co-creator of McGee Me. I have to tell you how I got that.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. I wanted to know. Tell us about what it was like working with McGee Me and Adventures in Odyssey and how you got there.
I got a call from another uninformed producer that asked me to go to the Ritz-Carlton with 18 of the most creative Christians in the country for 3 days, and we were going to create a children's TV series. And I showed up, and he was right. There were 17 of the most creative Christians in the country, and then there was me. And these guys, I mean, they're holding court. The first day, it's like, well, when I was helping Ron Howard with Happy Days, I said, Ronnie, and somebody's over here saying, well, when I got Amy Grant's career started, and I'm going, I've seen an episode of Happy Days. I own a CD of Amy Grant. I embarrassed myself so much. Here we go again. I excused myself from the first meeting, went up to my hotel room, had a good cry saying, God, you got to get me out of here. I'm way over my head. I know I promised to say yes to you. I got this one lame idea about a kid with an imaginary friend. I'll share that, and then I'll tell the group there's an emergency at home, and I got to go. Okay? Deal? I figured that was the same as yes. Yeah, right. I show up, and they say, Bill, what do you got? I said, well, just a kid with a man. Oh, well, tell us a little. I got nothing, Aaron. I got nothing. A kid and an imaginary friend, so I'm making it up as I go. Well, where does he live? A house. Well, that's good. A big house. Now I'm getting creative. This goes on for 72 hours, 3 days. At the end of the conference or the meeting of these geniuses, the head guy, the guy with the $1 million grant, says, Bill, I need you to stay after. And I think, great, he's going to make me pay for my hotel room because, I've been such a slug. And everybody goes home and he goes, well, Bill, it's become apparent to us that you're the man called to quarterback this new series. Now, I'd done some acting in my macaroni and cheese days, so my response was, well, yes, of course, I would make all the sense in the... But inside, Aaron, I'm going, what? What are you doing now? That's how McGee Me was formed. McGee is a code name my wife uses, we had to change it, a code name my wife uses in public situations whenever my sense of humor starts to embarrass her. And if I hear, that's enough now, McGee, translation, sit down, shut up, or there'll be trouble when we get home.
Wow.
So, again, it's the same old story. It's being totally unqualified, but being willing to be a jack donkey to his glory. And I think he loves it.
Yeah. And so what did the process look like after that? Once you got that grant, and how do you go about starting a TV show after that?
My co-creator was an animation fellow. And so we got together and we did a pilot script and a presentation, and that was shown to the money people. And then we brought in Focus on the Family, because at that point, these were VHS tapes when they first started. At that point, we were concerned that Christians would not accept that as a form of entertainment. So we brought in Focus on the Family. And they were gracious, and then the ball just started rolling, because there was one very good series I liked called The Donut Man, which was kids singing along, but that was about it. So we showed up on the scene. It's God's sovereign hand moving pieces around the board. And so we were commissioned to write first 3 episodes. And then it continued on after that.
Yeah. Yeah, man, it's a neat story. And like I said, I loved McGee Me whenever I was a kid. I think I identified with the McGee character. Or it's not with McGee, with the kid. I always get them
with Nicholas
confused now. Yeah. Because I think I was a shy, a little more introverted, but very imaginative, creative kid. And so I really identified with him when I was younger, and just and really enjoyed that show. And so that's neat. Love that story. Tell us about what you're working on now. You have a new. We have a couple of different series going on right now. One of them is a children's book series called The Magnificent Mulligans. Yeah. Tell us about the origin of that story and what you're doing with the series now.
Years ago, I sat in Focus on the Family's creative office and asked them, what do you guys want? What works for you guys? And they said, well, children and children like animals and multi-faceted family. So you didn't have to be a rocket scientist to connect those two together. And started off as a radio series with Adventures in Odyssey, sort of a small subset called the Magnificent Mulligans. The premise is a family who just happens to have as their motto, just say yes to God, starts to adopt these foster kids, actually from all over the world. And they wind up with all this eclectic group of kids, and they're running a wild animal park. So you got the animals, you got the kids, it's told from a chimpanzee's point of view, by the way. So he narrates it for us. She narrates it for us. And it's a delightful romp. It was fun doing the few episodes on Odyssey, but then it rolled around to just about a year ago. I proposed the book series, and they liked the idea again. And I got to tell you, it is a hoot to write, because yes, you get to deal with all the dynamics of children from different cultures and backgrounds. And so there's plenty of friction and drama there, and comedy. And then you throw in an ostrich or a kangaroo or a lion, and it's heaven. I can't wait to sit down and write those episodes. So we've got the first one actually just came out March 1 of 2023, called Leapin' Leopards. And we'll be doing more after that, probably 2 or 3 a year, until somebody says, "Okay, stop already."
Yeah, it sounds fun, and I haven't gotten one yet, but I'll be getting one for my kids. Whenever you sit down to write a series like this, and you think about the stories, and I know you have a few goals in mind. You want it to be engaging and entertaining. But being a Christian, you're also writing in your values and yes, writing in your worldview and teaching lessons through these stories. How do you balance out those things of doing good storytelling while also teaching moral lessons and values?
The moral lesson, the humor and the entertainment and the drama are just the candy coating to get the medicine down. My agenda, since being that 18-year-old boy watching The Godfather, my agenda has always been to put a strong message into the story. But the stronger the message, the more you have to candy coat the outside so that they don't taste it, because nobody likes a taste of medicine. Nobody likes to be preached at. So the balancing act is never to compromise the message, and yet at the same time never get caught, which is thankfully over the years I've learned anyway. I teach one class at a local high school, and that keeps my head in the game as far as what their struggles are, what they're working with, where they're where the immorality is trying to gobble up their souls. So that allows me to see where the needs are. So I start off with a need. I start off with a theme, a strong theme, and then candy coat it in such a way that nobody really knows it's happening until it's too late.
Yeah, so I was wondering, what does the creative process look like when you're writing stories like these? Do you begin with that moral theme or value that you then build a story around, or do you begin with your story and kind of play out how the story should work and then allow some moral issues to like naturally come up in that? Like, what does your creative process look like in writing stories like these?
First and foremost, the issues, the moral issues, and then it's just sitting down with the yellow legal pads and doing diagrams of how to make it work, how to make it fly, how to make the pages turn. So it's a combination of both. But as far as initial steps, it's message. Then okay, now let's look for ways of making it entertaining. One of the keys to my success is that green chair you see behind me there. My dad, who's passed 20 years ago now, used to sit in that chair when I'm writing. And when I first started out, I'd write these lovely, beautiful moments and paragraphs, and I'd read them back to Dad. I'd say, "Dad, what do you think?" And I'd get about 2 or 3 sentences in, and I would hear, I'd turn around, and he'd fallen asleep. So to this day, when I'm writing, my agenda is to keep my dad awake. I make believe that the kids have a channel selector in their hand, and the adults for that matter, that we have a channel selector in our hand, and if I so much as start to bore you, you have every right to change channels on me. So there's a certain energy that my work has that's all based on fear that you're going to set the book down.
Well, it's good to be, whether you're a writer or a speaker, any kind of communicator, it's good to be a communicator that has your audience's experience of hearing or reading it in mind. Because, yeah, it's easy to get caught up in your own flow of thoughts and then forget that, well, what I'm saying may not make sense to the person who's listening to this. I got to put myself in their shoes, or it may not be engaging to the person who's reading this, put myself where they are. And so that's a great practice. Another thing that I hear in your creative process is it sounds like you are thinking of the individual while you're writing. Because this is something that I've wrestled with whenever I write, and I haven't written fiction like you. I write more nonfiction, but it can sometimes be easy for us to be preparing a piece for a book, or if it's going to be an online article, and be thinking about the many people that could be reading it. And I find that it usually ends up making your writing dull because you start speaking in these overgeneralizing terms. You're making far too many little caveats and so on, versus wherever you imagine the individual that you're trying to speak to, the writing becomes much more powerful. And that's sort of what I'm hearing in the way that you approach your storytelling.
Well, that's a good point. With the children's stories, the child that I write in the back of my mind is right on the verge of ADD. I just have to keep the information coming and coming and coming, the entertainment coming, the laughter coming, and that earns me the right then to talk about deeper spiritual issues.
Yeah. You also have an adult series you're working on called Rendezvous with God.
Oh, I've written, Aaron, about 120 books, and this Rendezvous with God series is the most important and has ministered to me the most. I'll tell you the premise real quickly. It's about this agnostic professor who, quite against his will, gets sucked back into time from time to have these off-the-record conversations with Jesus Christ during a biblical moment. So but then it progresses to when Jesus starts popping up into his world today. And as he starts to go from seeker to new Christians, that's kind of what the second volume is. The third volume deals with prayer. And then the fourth volume deals with, okay, now let's start serving. But it's all done, again, in comedy. And it's done in hopefully a way that you can relate to this guy. And it's a different way of writing for me. Oftentimes I'll write myself into a corner and turn to a chair that I pretend Jesus is sitting in and go, now what? And the thoughts that will bubble up in my mind that I had not thought of before are pretty profound. So the series, as I'm writing the series, it's almost like praying as I'm writing. And I've never done that before. I've done I'm setting aside a period of time to pray for the work. Okay, now I'm sitting down at the desk, and now I'm going to work. And that's certainly a valid way to do it. But this way, I'm in constant prayer as I'm writing. And I'm just having the time of my life with that.
Yeah.
And the letters I'm getting from people saying it's life-changing. And I want to write back and say, yeah, me too.
That's great. That's something that I've experienced in my writing as well, or especially in preaching a sermon. You preach a sermon, and the Holy Spirit moves through it, and someone comes and tells you, "Oh, that was so helpful," and usually I'll just say, "Oh, thank you," but I think to me as well, the process of preparing it and writing it and then delivering it, God was working in my heart as well, and so that is a wonderful experience whenever you get to be a recipient of God's work, even whenever you're also the channel for God's work as well.
Yeah, and getting to taste the water as it's flowing through us. For me, writing has always been building up a lake. Okay, now we'll release the lake, but this is more of a stream. This rendezvous with God is more of a stream. As I'm writing, I'm drinking from it, and as I said, it's ministering as much to me as it is to the readers.
Yeah. So it sounds like these days you're mostly working on books. When's the last time that you worked on a series, whether it was for television or radio, or is that something that you still do?
Well, there is that hat too. We have a media company, a film production company. We finished a children's feature film right when COVID hit, called Secret Agent Dingledorf and His Trusty Dog Splat. And it did pretty well. At one point, it came in number 8 in the box office, but that's when 4 people were showing up at theaters during the whole COVID thing. So we're doing that. It's doing children's films is really my heart, because they're still malleable. You can still reach them. As we get older, we know that we get a little more, our wineskin starts to dry out a little bit. D.L. Moody said if he could go back and live his life again, he would devote his entire life, his entire ministry to ministering to children. So we're spending a lot of time looking at doing children's films and children's projects. It's a little more difficult, actually, because at least at this season of time, the faith community isn't very interested in investing in children's projects. It's not as glamorous. It's not as creative. You can't say, well, yes, it's not as much fun to say, well, yeah, I'm investing in this little children's film, as opposed to, well, I'm doing this big thing. So it's our biggest frustration right now is we have a good company, but are finding the people that believe investing in children's projects is more important than the many adult films, Christian adult films that are out there.
Yeah. In your experience of having been on the other side of production in film and TV. How has that shaped and affected the way that you take in media yourself, and view the media and the different options that there are for media out there today?
I think we underestimate the power of the media. I think there is, next to the Holy Spirit, I don't think anything shapes our culture more than the media. These studies prove it again and again and again. There was a study by J.L. Singer years ago at Yale University that said the outlook on any morality can be changed through enough TV viewing. And I see, much to my frustration, I see our culture being seduced and gradually moved and educated by people that have a different perspective of life than I do, or even than Christ does. There's, and it's not just, even the American Medical Association has put out some, in fact, I have something I can never remember. I found a quote here. This is from the Journal of the American Medical Association. Quote, long-term childhood exposure to television is a causal factor behind approximately 1/2 of the homicides committed of the homicides committed in the United States, or approximately 10,000 homicides annually. That's the American Medical Association. If hypothetically television technology had never been developed, there would today be 10,000 fewer murders each year in the United States, 70,000 fewer rapes, and 700,000 fewer injurious assaults.
Wow.
That was in 1992 they published that. And you and I both, as we watch the media, see it growing darker and darker and darker. And that's not to pick on the producers of the media. They have an agenda that they think is worthy, and that's to educate us and to take us out of old-fashioned Christian values. And I'm not picking on the people for doing that. I don't see them as the enemy. I see them as prisoners of war, but I don't see them as the enemy. But so you have this huge power that can transform culture that quite often is in the hands of people that want to transform culture, but not necessarily in the Judeo-Christian way that it should be transformed. So I'm very cautious. My kids, when they were growing up, felt sometimes they were living in a vacuum when it was like, Dad won't let us watch anything. Well, almost. What we did do was we played a game called Name That Lie. We would watch something of question, and then we would talk about it a little bit. So it wasn't just, banning everything, because they're going to be exposed. A child's going to be exposed to the first sleepover or the first whatever. So it's just kind of inoculating them and raising them up as they should go in and trust. But I think we underestimate the power of the media to transform a culture, and study after study shows that. Not just with and again, I see it with the high school kids I work with. Now, if you're not sleeping together after a few dates, you're really, you're out of it. So, you touched a nerve. I'll try not to scream and shout, but it's a powerful medium.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And that's one of the things that really concerns me about the state of our media today is the lessons that it teaches. Whenever you watch movies, and so many movies and TV shows today, they're teaching bad behavior as if it is good. And if you look at the protagonist of so many popular movies and so on today, they're displaying character traits that a couple decades ago would have been the character traits of the villain or the antagonist. They tend to be self-centered. They tend to, along with the self-centeredness, and not care too much about others around them, and lifting them up as much as it is just like accomplishing whatever their goal is. They don't practice self-control. They're impulsive, going along with the self-control. They're impulsive. They don't practice delayed gratification. They, it's presented in a lot of series today. If the protagonist doesn't, you never see them like struggle with anything. And so saying, if you never have to work at something, then it's not worth accomplishing.
Yeah, and if the problem isn't solved in a 30-minute show or a 120-minute movie, that's the universe. And again, I can understand that, but for a child or an adult to think, well, I've invested 120 minutes in this project and it hasn't paid off, so it must not be worthy. We were just talking about the abolition of slavery yesterday in class, and that guy Wilberforce, 18 years he pressed to change, to eradicate slavery in Great Britain. That was not a 120-minute movie.
Yeah.
That was 18 years of his life. So, and sometimes I think, God bless us, but I think sometimes as Christians we get so busy counting the swear words and the superficial stuff that we don't see what you just said. And that's, what is the theme? What are we teaching? What is going to stick in the child's heart for the rest of their life? I used to have a Bible verse over my desk that says, it's better to have a millstone tied around your neck than you make the least one of these stumble. And I'm very concerned. And again, pivoting back to what we're talking about, children media, I wish my brothers and sisters would see the power of film over a child's life. If I would ask you, what films most impacted you over your entire life, and you'd think through it, most of the time you'd pick the films you saw as a child or as a young person still in development.
Yeah.
And I think we're doing a disservice by not investing in our children in media. Or we're doing a disservice by not knowing the power of the media, not respecting it, and not using it, instead of just, well, there's nothing I can do. Yes, there is. Yes, you can play name that lie, or you can invest in something. It's not just a matter of putting our head in the sand.
Yeah. Along with that, we've said a few times that good stories are powerful, and that good stories through media, whether it be books, TV, or movies, these are powerful things. Why is it that good stories, do you think, why is it so powerful and shapes us as human beings so much?
That's a great question. Because we live it with the storyteller, I think. When we look back at Jesus' teaching, he spent more time in parables than he did giving us facts and figures. Because I think the parables wrap humanity, story wraps humanity around the fact or the figure, so that we see the humanity living it out. So it's not just a static statistic that's floating in our head, but we see it. Yeah, we see it lived out as a human being.
Yeah, and I think it's because at the core of reality and what makes up our world is fundamentally a story. Even whenever we look at the Bible is fundamentally a story. And what is God doing in the world? It's told to us through a story. And so we're beings that inhabit not just... I think it's harder for us to see this today because we live in, as the great writer one of my friends, Os Guinness, says we live in an unenchanted world today, and that has lost any great overarching story. And so we live in a world that's just made up of material and closed system of cause and effect. And so we forget that we're actually living fundamentally not in a universe that's just made of materials, but a universe that is a story, and the story of God. And so I think that's why that we are beings that are so fundamentally shaped and influenced by stories, because it goes to the core of the world that we are lived in, and the God that we are made by, that He is a God who is active in this story as the author.
Yeah. Yep. I think, yep. We can say God is love, but until we see that enacted, it's just a fortune cookie slogan, right? But when we see that attribute of God in action, then we believe it. Then it's real to us. Yeah.
And so you've talked before about how you raise your own children and help them to discern the media that they're taking in by playing the Spot the Lie game. What are some other ways that Christians can better engage with media today?
You use a great word. Be engaged with it. If you're dealing with children, watch at least the first episode with a child, so that you can decide whether you want them to continue. We have to be active in it. The days of Leave It to Beaver and Father Knows Best as a babysitter have come and gone. Now the media is laden with people that want a message, so you need to listen to what the message is, and then make the decision from there. The president of a leading studio that focuses to a great extent on children in 2022 said that 50% of their characters will now be LGBTQ plus or minority, and not to address that issue at all, but just saying she has an agenda. Everybody has an agenda, and you need to know you need to discern what the agenda is of the show. So that is being engaged. And I know we don't have time. I know we got 1,000 other things to do. But gracious me, we're talking our children's minds and their souls. So the first thing I would do, I would sit and watch a show with my child. I would tell them where the landmines are, and maybe from time to time drop by and see where things that maybe you disagree with have popped up. And get them to talk about it. Just respect it. It's like music, right? There's some music that just drags you down and beats you up and teaches you to disrespect people. And then there's other music that lifts people up and that honors them. So you just look past the swearing and see what the theme is. And I'm not suggesting watch shows that have swear words, but I sometimes joke with my Christian filmmakers, or the audience even for that matter. They say how violence has seeped into our culture and into filmmaking. You can beat somebody up or you can shoot them, but boy, you better not swear while you're doing it. So we have to know the difference between what God's truth is and what our cultural truths are.
Yeah.
And we have to be on our toes, that's all. Because, as I said, I don't believe there's any power more powerful next to the Holy Spirit than the media, and particularly upon our children.
Yeah. Something you said reminded me how the attitude that people have had towards Christian media for at least my entire life has been one of, it's well, number one, it's always second rate, and oh, it's not as good a storytelling because it's just moralistic teachings with a bad story kind of tacked onto it. And so it's not as good as someone who just sets out to write a really good story. And you reminded me of how, well, everyone has a moralistic teaching. Most of the greatest stories were started in the mind of the writer with a moral conflict that the writer then played out in a story. And so it's a good thought for us all to keep in mind, especially as thoughtful Christians wanting to engage our culture well, as Christian parents, to remember that everyone, like you said, whether they claim to or not, everyone has an agenda, and so that doesn't mean that we should completely disengage, but that we should be thoughtful, discerning, and especially talk about what is the agenda. Talk about it. Yeah. I think that one of those powerful ways that we could disarm the bad media, or especially the bad themes being pushed on us or on our kids in media, is to just expose them and talk about them, and then that really disarms the power of that potential bad lesson.
And from my side of the tracks, learn how to tell a good story.
Yes.
Learn it so that doesn't come off as propaganda or a huge moral with a thin candy coating around it. Tell a great story, and tell it in such a way that the morality bubbles up in the story. So oftentimes, younger Christian storytellers will come in with a message and blast it through, and then, oh yeah, we better have it some entertaining, as opposed to flipping it around and not getting caught. Make a great story. Yeah. And then when you walk away, go, oh, which is actually what our friends in the secular media do all the time. They understand great story. It needs to appear as if great story is the primary objective.
Yeah. Well, I do question that with the last couple of years of movies and whatnot, if they really do know what a good story is, because we've been getting slim pickings for really great stories lately. I just had this question pop into my mind that I'd like to hear your thoughts. We've been looking at a lot of the negatives, like here's some bad lessons and bad ways of going about doing it. But what are some standout examples in your mind of storytelling with great lessons that has been done really well? Whether that be a writer, director, or some specific examples of movies, series. What are some of the top ones that jump out of your mind as like, this is one that was done well?
Wow. Going back to some of the classics, to me, It's a Wonderful Life. That Frank Capra directed, Jimmy Stewart starred in. It's a wonderful sermon about the fact that it's little things that you do for people that make you great. So I try to show that to my class from time to time too, that I teach. And they don't feel that they're being preached at, but the story is so powerful.
Yeah.
There's that. What are some others? All humility aside, McGee and Me worked for you as a child because we understood how to tell a story.
Yeah.
I think The Chosen is fascinating. I think Dallas, the producer director, is doing it well. His production value is there. He lets the message bubble up in the story. He doesn't clobber you over the head with it. He makes the people real. I have a novel called Eli that's a retelling of the gospel as if it happened in America today. From his birth in the Motel 6 laundry room to his lynching in the Bible Belt, and everything in between. And I probably get more mail with that than anywhere else, than any of my books or films that say things like, I've been a Christian my whole life and now I finally get it. Well, they get it because it's humanity. They get it because it's we've taken Jesus off the felt board and made him real. made the situations real. Others, I'm focused a lot on children's projects. I should make a list. I don't know. What about you? What have stood out to you?
Oh, it's a great question.
I know you asked it.
I didn't mean to. I didn't mean to compliment my own question, but I think, I guess I go back to the movies and series that have shaped me the most and that I've watched and rewatched the most over the years. The Lord of the Rings trilogy would probably be one of the most impactful to me, which of course based on some of the greatest books ever written. So the Lord of the Rings trilogy, I think the original Star Wars trilogy taught some great lessons, which is why it was so powerful and it's shaped our culture so much over the last few decades. I've loved the Band of Brothers series, just on courage, sacrifice, friendship, and all those. Actually, I have a list that I keep on my in the notes app on my phone of books, series, and movies that tell great moral stories. And so now I'm having a hard time remembering all the different ones that I've written down in there. But I've got a pretty good little list going in there.
Would you mind emailing me that list when we're done here? I'd love
sure.
to see it.
Yeah, sure, I could. Yeah, I'd love to.
Good.
But those are some of the first ones that come to my mind. I know there's a documentary that I have on there called The Rescue. It was it's on Disney Plus. It was a Nat Geo documentary about the rescue crew that went in to save those that soccer team of boys in Thailand a couple years ago. There was that flash flood. They got caught in a cave, and this rescue effort that went on to go get them. And they ended up being rescued by these ordinary guys. It wasn't. Also the SEALs from Thailand, the American military that was there, they did a lot. Obviously, they couldn't have happened without them. But really, it came down to these ordinary men who would just go diving on the weekends, who saved those boys and got them out of the cave. The documentary, it takes a lot to make me cry. I wept almost throughout the whole thing. It was just absolutely amazing. One of the and a true story with real footage. They have footage of the moment they came up into the cave and saw the boys for the first time. It is extremely powerful, and so that's one of the ones on that list. A little bit different there, being that it's a documentary. So,
but it's still a story, isn't it? It's still a story.
Yeah.
There's one that showed up real briefly that I really like called The Professor and the Madman. Mel Gibson is, I think, is really underrated by the Christian community. Yes, there's violence, and yes, there's language, but there's a heart there that just keeps surfacing. And it's called The Professor and the Madman. And if ever there's a movie about forgiveness, that has it. I would recommend that. Again, I don't remember about language. I don't remember about the stuff that Mel does, but I do know that was a powerful thing. Yeah.
Well, we could keep going on, but we are running out of time. Before we go, do you want to tell people about how they can find your work online and stay in touch with what you're doing and pick up a copy of your books?
Sure. I answer every email, and my email address is bill@billmyers.com, MYERS, bill@billmyers.com. The books, The Magnificent Mulligans, are available. Focus on the Family publishes it along with Tyndale, so I imagine that would be in any Christian bookstore or on Amazon. And then Rendezvous with God, it would be the same thing. It'd either be on Amazon or a local bookstore. And if you can't find it, drop me a line and we'll track it down. Because in both instances, those books are worth their tree.
Great. Well, I'll have all that linked in the show notes, so any of you guys who are wanting to pick up a copy of The Magnificent Mulligans, Rendezvous with God, or any of Bill's other books, I'll have those linked in the show notes below, and you can find them there. I'll also link his email address if you're wanting to reach out to him to tell him about how some of his work has impacted you, if you have questions, so that'll be there as well. And you guys can stay in touch with all the great work that he's doing. Well, this has been a really fun conversation, Bill. I appreciate the time and appreciate the work you're doing. It's been great to meet you and talk to you. Like I said, having someone who's benefited from your work with the different stuff you've done. So it's been a pleasure. Been a pleasure. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thanks, Aaron. And the next time you're in Southern California, swing by. I'll make you a great peanut butter and jelly.
All right. I'll take you up on that.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks for listening. I hope this episode provided you with biblical clarity to live with confidence in our confusing world. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please share it with others, post about it on social media, or leave a rating and review. To catch up the latest from me, you can go to my website, aaronchamp.com. While you're there, subscribe to my newsletter so that you can be updated anytime I share new content. You can also follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Aaron M. Champ. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time. Until then, hold fast.